I just want to show everyone today the new MPs that are coming into the Parliament all had their orientation day. This is how you vote. This is where the toilet is. Good luck. This is how you stab a leader. This is how they had the full Canberra insider thing that happened today. No confirmation whether Zali Steggall walked from the Northern Beaches to Canberra or whether she, of course, got straight in there, straight into the chairman's lounge, leaning forward and all that. Oh, God, for the next 3 years. Robert, you had to go through this experience in the New South Wales Parliament, of course, in their upper house. What the hell do they tell you?
Well, they tell you, as you said, where the toilet is. Literally? They give you a timetable, so this is where the sitting times are, blah, blah, blah. Here's 2 big fat books of standing orders, which you've got to follow, and I still don't know them to this day. It's all too hard for me. And you know, they give you all that sort of highfalutin pontificating stuff about how important you are and this is your opportunity to make a difference and all that sort of stuff. And then you're only there for about 6 months or a year and you realise you're completely irrelevant.
Yeah, this is it. Robbo, you've been through the experience?
I didn't have one.
Really?
You
didn't need one?
Well, I landed...
You knew where the toots were?
I think it was partly that, but the other part was I came in mid-term, so I took Costa's seat in the upper house. And, so you get no induction at all, and it was one of those things that you land there and no one, even on your own side, tells you anything, so it's literally sink or swim.
Well, this is the thing, because, Rebecca, what I'm interested in, and look, we're going to really try in the first sitting week to talk to as many of these new faces as possible, because I think we can all agree, for a lot of MPs and senators or upper house members, their best speech is their first and their second best is their last, or maybe it's the other way around, because they're about the principles they hope to bring and the lessons they have learnt from the experience of being there. I must say, for all the endless chat we have about how stale our parliament can be, it's a pretty big class of new MPs that are coming through with new and fresh perspectives, some people from the machine, some people from the real world. But to me, I just hope that they're political masters. Well, obviously, they have to vote and behave themselves and all the rest of it. Let us get an insight into who these people are, because their communities back them. I want to know what they want to do with this opportunity.
Well, I think there's some very impressive people amongst them. I went along to a couple of functions that Melissa Graham-McIntosh had, who won Lindsay from Labor. I think, you know, I see that as part of this move where, you know, more and more of that area becomes aspirational and very winnable for a sensible, level-headed Liberal Party that is offering and looking at those people. I think she's one to watch.
But it's this thing where, Robbo, obviously you were a man who a lot of people had marked for big things, coming from leading... there were plenty who wanted to stop you too.
Yeah,
you got there in the end. What's your advice? Now, I know we're speaking to a very small audience here of, you know, a couple of dozen people who are starting the club here. My assumption is that it's a little... I'm imagining it's a little bit like prison, where you want to walk in and you want to just watch how things work for the first little while rather than make the massive splash early. Because to go back to the Bad Blood documentary that we had earlier in the night here on Sky News and back to the leadership nonsense that brought Turnbull there in the first place, the people who always get played are the first termers. These are the ones who either are being used to get up the front a lot faster, or they're being scared to say, hey, go in this direction or that direction. What's your advice to them about how to keep a level head when others are either promising you the world or otherwise?
Well, it's a place where people will blow hot air up you know what. My advice to anyone, to be honest, is to sit back, take it in, watch how it works. Unlike Robert, and I didn't do it either, but I think it is actually handy to understand some of the standing orders, because you can actually get a better appreciation for how the parliament works, the sorts of times where you could make an intelligent intervention into part of that process. The other thing I'd say is inaugural speeches, is to think about what that will look like at the end, because generally what happens is when you're leaving and you're making your final speech, although I never made a final speech, people look at that when they get up to speak as you're leaving. So you need to think about it in the context of, what do I want to achieve? But I'm going to be here for a long period of time. What does that look like in the end? So it's really about, think about what that's going to look like. Take your time to get a feel for the place. Don't try and jump up too early. Actually learn it. And the other thing is, despite all the rhetoric and everything else, the one thing, or one piece of advice I give to people is, Be a bit respectful inside the chamber. You know, play the issue, not the person. I think that puts you in good stead to actually get more done over your time inside the parliament.
Well, it's this thing. I mean, Robert, you know, you've seen them come and go. Are the people who end up moving through the ones who are quiet at the start, or they come in with sort of this, you've got to be bolshy from the start, because this is not a shy business, so you've got to come in sort of a few go.
Oh, look, I think you see a bit of both. I think you see personality coming out straight away on some of them. Some people are actually quite clever in terms of attacking it. I mean, what you alluded to before at the start of this was really quite right. You know, all of the maiden speeches, if you like, or the first speeches are full of hope, full of, you know, I'm going to change the world. This is my family history. This is my background. And then when you get to the end of it all ends in tears. So you start with hope and end in tears. And somewhere in between there, maybe you've done some good. But yeah, look, you see both types. A lot will sit back, especially in the larger parties. They're really just there to make up the numbers. That's, to be perfectly frank, whether it's the Labor Party or the Coalition, that's what they're there for. Smaller parties like ours, we're there, we have to make a point, we have to do the work, and frankly, you know, when there's two of you there, and Mark's in the same boat now in our house, there's a lot of work to be done, and so therefore you've got to focus on the things that are important to you and what you think are important to your constituents.
Yes, you've done it right for a small party, though, was it? 3 downstairs, couple of
yeah.
You're going all right. You're going all right.
Strategy.
Yeah, it's just strategy, and eventually it'll get you there. Now, I want to talk about... now, I've got to be careful here, because this bloke, I would imagine, is rather litigious, but a guy who made no impact at all in the election, Oliver Yates, one of the sort of Alex Turnbull candidates, says that he's actively considering going to the Court of Disputed Returns. Why? Well, as he said today, I saw so much misleading advertising and documents during the election that you have no wonder how any voter could make a sensible decision. He ran in the seat of Kooyong, of course didn't go anywhere near winning it or even tipping it in one direction or the other. I'm probably giving him the thing he wants more than anything else, attention. But what do you think?
So what I go back to when Ross Free got knocked off by Jackie Kelly in 1990, whenever it was, and the Labor Party and Jackie Kelly, I think, had citizenship in New Zealand or something. They go to the Court of Disputed Returns. The ballot gets overturned. There's a by-election run, and Jackie Kelly increases her margin. And I think history is this circumstance is one where history is likely to repeat itself. Assuming he succeeds, the likelihood is that Frydenberg will increase his majority. These things never end well. People get quite irritated, and I can remember being out there in Lindsay at this by-election, and I can tell you, mate, it was standing there and people just coming up saying, I did this 3 months ago, you've dragged me back here, and they were really sending a lesson, and I think it'll be exactly the same here.
Well, also, if you think about this, from New England to Batman, Tasmania, Queensland, South Australia, Western Australia, 100% of the by-elections that happened because of Section 44, either the MP or the party they used to represent were returned. They don't want anything, they don't want to vote again.
No.
They want to vote for governments, and then you do it for 3 years, and if you come up with any reason I have to vote before then, unless it's scandal-induced by the MP and they're not going to be on the ballot paper, they're probably going to reaffirm you.
Yeah.
It struck me too that it was very patronising. He talked also about these posters in the seat of Chisholm and, you know, Chinese language speakers, and as if they sort of they'd be confused. They wouldn't really know. I mean, both of the candidates were Chinese background. I think the voters in Chisholm knew very well, particularly the Chinese-speaking ones, who the two candidates were, what the issues were at play, and knew exactly who they wanted to vote for. And this idea, oh, well, they didn't really know, they were tricked, I think is very patronising and completely misreads that result.
But also, I do think that if there is an appetite, now might be one of those times to have a conversation about how polling places work and maybe how the polling system works here, where there is going to be a bit of a push on for optional preferential voting to move to the federal system. I don't have a problem with that, because it means you don't end up with this sort of endless nonsense conversations about preference deals, etc., etc. It brings us a little closer to first past the post than maybe other systems do. But also, I think that in the era of GetUp, who, yes, was impotent at this election, and there's a lot of other factors that got there in Warringah, I think we need to have proper chats about who gets actual access to a polling place, about how much advertising you're allowed to have at a polling place, about how to vote forms work, because as we know, if you're a smaller party, you're going up against the army, that is a trade union movement for Labor, or that is the paid up and prouds that are there for the Liberals. I like the Tasmanian system, to be honest, which I think has actually banned how to vote cards. I know that in some areas it's either New Zealand or the other way around, where there's a how to vote that's in the booth, and that's it. Because I've got to say, I think that Australians are very tired of having to run the gauntlet, and I think that it's a massive waste of a lot of effort.
I actually think, Paul, that because we've seen that happen in the Northern Territory a couple of elections ago in the local election up there, and basically minor parties don't get a chance. You can't stand, I think, within 200 metres of an electoral place at all.
Right.
You can't hand out any material, and that applies to everybody. So that means it's the parties with the money who can advertise on the paid media that will win the election. So the chances of minor parties and, you know, plurality of opinion it's just not possible.
But even then, in reverse, my suggestion is that the only people who should have access to, you know, within 150 metres of a polling thing is a registered political party. I don't want to get up there. I don't want the activist groups there. I don't want a union movement there. I don't want a cashed-up billionaire deciding to do this stuff, because I've got to say, particularly, I mean, the people of Warringah, and I understand it was a weird election that had all this other stuff, but those polling places looked disgraceful. They looked disgraceful.
So it's interesting, there's different laws for the state than there is federal in terms of how much material and how the material can be placed around a polling booth. I mean, in reality, I think one of the challenges will be that if you, whatever rules you apply, I mean, I know, you know, there's a lot of polling places that I'm aware of where the Liberal Party were paying people to hand out how to votes. The issue becomes one that if your thing gets up is, well, how do you just decide who gets to hand out and who doesn't? I mean, does someone come around and check, you know, I've got to pull my Labor Party membership out and go, yes, I'm a card-carrying member of the Labor...
Don't you think people have had enough of the gauntlet?
Well, I'm not sure. I mean,
You say we ought to run it?
No, I think... No, not even so much run the gauntlet. I think it's a great celebration of Australian democracy.
Fair enough.
And can I just say, I mean, I've handed out how to votes since I was 10 years old. I think if you're respectful for people, if you're genuinely respectful for people, you know, you offer them something, you're not standing in their way. I mean, every now and then someone will say something smart to you, but the majority of people will just walk past and say, no thanks, I'll take them all.
That's right.
And they're on their way. I mean, I think it's, again, it's a behavioural thing by a very small minority outside a polling booth can make people uncomfortable. But by and large, I think I'm much happier, to be honest. I'd much rather see someone come in and take a Liberal how to vote and take no others just so they can exercise their vote as opposed to waste their vote. The point I make when people come in and they complain about having to vote is, you know, there's parts of the world where people are dying for the opportunity to vote.
Yeah, absolutely.
And here, people whinge that, you know, once every 3 years or 4 years they've got to go to the ballot box.
And there's always fun for me to walk up to the Greens person and how to vote and said, no, I'll be right, thanks.